but know that you're there. So yeah, I think I can see people coming in now. So welcome everyone. My name is Lauren Foley. I'll give him a brief introduction as to who we are, who I am, what we're doing here today. And yeah, hopefully we'll have a great event. So first of all, yes, I'm Lauren Foley. I work for Women in Dev. And yeah, I'm raging feminist, so just super interested in all things gender. Don't know a whole lot about the intersections between gender and climate, so I am super excited to be moderating today's event and learning from our amazing speakers. And hopefully I'll be kind of asking the questions that we all want to know, because there's a lot to learn, and we all kind of, I suppose, need to know this stuff. To talk about Women in Dev itself, so Women in Dev is essentially kind of a network of women working in the development sectors, kind of gender sectors, and it's brilliant that we run events like this. We have a podcast, we have a steering committee, and we just kind of we're kind of a one-stop shop for people to come together in this sector to learn about, I guess, how we can improve the sector and how we can kind of, I suppose, make the world a better place for women in general. This series is very exciting. So you might have attended our first event in this series, which was on global health back in July. There is 5 events in this series, and this one is focusing on gender and climate, the kind of intersections between the two. And it's called the Tapestry series. And basically, that's because in each of these events, we'll have a graphic illustrator from ThinkLink Graphics present, and you can actually see kind of the beginning of the graphic that's being formed here now, kind of in your corner, or you should be able to see if you go on to kind of gallery view. And basically at the end of the 5 events, we should have 5 tapestries, so to speak, and we will kind of, I suppose, be making the links between all of them. So the different topics that we're doing on are global health, climate, racial equality, funding, and then feminist organizing. And I suppose that our purpose, our kind of hope is to show that like these sectors don't exist on their own or in a vacuum. They're all connected, and there's all this, I guess we can kind of all get involved, even if we come from one particular area. We all have a part to play in the kind of broader scheme of things. So that is and that thank you to Devin from ThinkLink for being here today, and we're super excited to see what the tapestry looks like at the end. I guess for the run of the show, we have 3 amazing speakers who I will just kind of introduce briefly, and I will allow them to kind of give a more kind of in-depth introduction as to who they are. So first off speaking, we'll have Ursula Miniszewski, Director of Gender and Equality at the Global Greengrants Fund, which is great to have the kind of like the funding aspect of the kind of gender and climate kind of like sector at the event, and she'll also be joining the Women in Dev steering committee in the next few months, which is very exciting. So we are very happy to have you here. Thank you so much. Next we have Aqlila Alwy, a climate activist based in Kenya, from the Africa-based Rise Up movement. So again, great to have the kind of activist perspective here on this as well, and hopefully we'll kind of touch on a lot of different things throughout the event. And then finally we have Pascaline Umulisa, the global program manager for Girl-led Action on Climate Change with the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. So again, another kind of different perspective on this, the kind of, I suppose, the education angle of how we are, I suppose, teaching people about climate, and particularly young girls, and I suppose how we can all kind of play a part, I suppose, in this movement. So again, I'm super excited to hear from the speakers. I suppose the kind of housekeeping, they'll all speak for about 10 to 12 minutes, and then at the end we will have a Q&A. Anyone who's here, you're free to put questions in the question box as you go along, and then we will also and then we'll ask them at the end, and hopefully have a bit of a conversation on what we're doing. So that is it from me, I think. Also, if you want to, I suppose, raise a hand and actually speak your question as well, you can do the raise hand function. And I think that is it from me. So we will start off with Ursula. I suppose just give us an idea of who you are, what you do, and the kind of work you're doing with the Global Greengrants Fund. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Lauren. I'm really happy to be here with the other guests today, and coming from a funder perspective and kind of providing that today for everybody. As Lauren mentioned, I'm the Director of Gender and Equity at Global Greengrants Fund, and we have 2 offices, one in London and one in Colorado in the US. And well, and now, you know, office is it's a little bit of a antiquated notion as we are all virtual essentially. But I wanted to talk a little bit today about Global Greengrants Fund and what we're doing, like Lauren said, at the intersection of women and the environment and gender justice and climate justice. So since 1993, Global Greengrants Fund has been one of the leading organizations in the world, which supports grassroots-led efforts that prioritize building an environmentally healthy and socially just world. So we are a social and environmental justice organization and public charity. So we raise the money that we give out. And we use a model that is decentralized, a philanthropic model that's decentralized and decolonized. We have activists all over the world, over 200 of them, who are acting as our grant-making advisors. And they are from the local environmental and social justice movements in their regions. And they are recommending and really choosing and making decisions about who is getting the funding from Global Greengrants Fund. And so while it is true, I think we often hear, and it's, you know, been all over the news and in narratives for years, that women and girls are disproportionately impacted by the impacts of climate change, especially in the global South. It's important, though, to see the whole picture and not just women and girls as victims. And they're also, because they're also designing, leading, implementing sustainable and lasting solutions to climate change all over the world. But only, interestingly and kind of appallingly, only 0.2% of all foundation funding is directed to women's environmental action. And that's something that Global Greengrants believes must absolutely change. And so one of our priority areas and the program that I lead is the Gender and Environment program. And we envision a world in which climate and environmental agendas are inclusive and provide sustainable and gender just solutions, resulting in a healthy, safe, and equitable world for all. So within that vision, we promote women's leadership and equal access to rights, opportunities, and resources within the environmental justice movement. And their cultural context by doing two things. One is actually providing grants and increasing the number of grants always that support gender just projects in our own environmental grant making. And that includes getting women and girls access to their rights, to decision making around the environment, political participation, land ownership, etc. And we make over 300 grants per year to protect the planet to women-led organizations and projects. So we, just as an example of some of the types of projects we fund, we support projects ranging from funding an Indigenous women's group to hire a local lawyer and learn more about their rights to their land, to their ancestral land, so that they can defend against mining companies, for example, that are often coming in and doing illegal and exploitative practices. And so, you know, providing them some recourse by which they can challenge some of these activities, these exploitative activities. We support women planting and managing mangroves across the world, especially in kind of coastal areas. Mangroves, I am obsessed with mangroves. They are magical in my mind. They are climate change mitigators. They store more carbon than some Amazon forests. They're also adapters in terms of with the rising sea levels caused by climate change, there are storm surges that are increasing all over the world in coastal areas. And mangroves are critical to protecting islands and land from those storm surges. So you can see why, I mean, I think they're pretty amazing in all aspects, but typically it's the women in communities who are stewarding and managing the mangrove forests. And then another example that I like to share of the types of projects that we support, one is that we supported a group led by Mama Aleta in Indonesia, and she is a community activist who led a group of women in a silent weaving protest against some mining activity that was happening in their ancestral land. She's an indigenous woman. And what the women did was sit at the kind of openings of the mines and wove for days, just silently. And their husbands and families would bring them food, and they just sat there blocking the entrances to the mines for days. And eventually the mining company left, and they ended up saving tens of thousands of acres of forests. So those are a few different examples of the types of projects that we support. The second way that we kind of reach this vision of a more equitable world is raising awareness, kind of leveraging our position as a funder, leveraging that position to raise awareness and build capacity in our philanthropic community with other funders about the importance of funding at this intersection of women's and girls' rights and the environment, and collectively building best practices in terms of funding for how to do that. So one of the ways that Global Greengrants has done that is partner with Prospera, the international network of women's funds. And so we kind of have the environmental justice and the women's rights movements coming together, which is pretty exciting as they've often been pretty polarized from one another. And we've developed a couple of different publications. The most recent one is a mapping of the funding landscape for this intersection of women and the environment. And that's where I got that data point that I mentioned earlier of the 0.2% of funding that actually goes to the intersection of women and climate change specifically. And so then from that publication, what we kind of built, Prospera and Global Greengrants Fund, it still exists almost 4 years later, a funder learning community for women in the environment. And that is a group of 20 funders. And we hold monthly calls, and it's for peer-to-peer learning about the intersection of women and the environment. And we share strategies for how to fund at this intersection, especially at the grassroots. We share challenges and successes, and it's a space for them to be really vulnerable about the types of challenges and issues that they're facing in their own positions, in their institutions, but then also contribute to kind of more of a collective approach amongst funders to funding at this intersection. And I wanted to kind of also, after I'm talking about kind of Global Greengrants and how we fund at this intersection, I want to kind of zoom out and talk about kind of this intersection more, not academically, but a little bit zoomed out. So what I talk about is how we're living in a time of radical and global and environmental, social, and political shifts all over the world. Political, from more conservative governments to climate change impacting everyone, not just in the global South. And these shifts call for radical responses and collective visioning for a just future. And the systems of oppression, inequality, and patriarchy that we all live under around the world, and exploitation, are responsible for our current reality. And those same systems that are driven by and depend on the economic models of natural resource extraction and exploitation and basically profit at all costs are the same systems that depend on structural oppression and inequality to remain viable. So it feeds itself. So if we want to affect real change and ensure sustainable and relevant and lasting climate solutions, we need systems change. And so that's also part of what Global Greengrants focuses on, is grant making to address kind of systems change. And the way that we think about kind of feminist approaches to systems change is that they challenge dominant power structures and these economic systems rooted in white supremacy, patriarchy, and that prioritize profit over people and the planet. So we view feminist climate solutions as intersectional that include cross-movement collaboration required to tackle these huge pressing issues of our time: climate change, inequality, rise of authoritarianism, anti-gender agendas. And so one of the reasons why we prioritize this kind of intersectional approach is not just because that's equitable and addresses some of these really entrenched power dynamics throughout all of our systems that we live under, but also because we can't not fight this fight without each other. And so this cross-movement collaboration is critical. And that brings me to this quote that I like to use from the IPCC. Gender is a key axis of social inequality that intersects with other systems of power and marginalization, including race, culture, class, and socioeconomic status, location, sexuality, age, gender. To cause these unequal experiences of climate change vulnerability and adaptive capacity. And so while that focuses a little bit more on the kind of vulnerable, more like victimization, it's important to understand the different layers of how these intersectional kind of identities are impacting people differently and cause different impacts of climate change on them and in their lives. And so I think I'll wrap up by really emphasizing that more kind of actions. So according to I think this audience includes activists, funders, all sorts of constituencies and different stakeholders. So in addition to explaining what the types of groups and projects that we fund, I also want to address funders and those out there who are interacting directly with resources and grassroots organizations, which is to support communities that have historically been excluded from decision making, from political participation, from access to financial resources, to basic access to rights like clean water and healthy food, but they're also on the front lines of climate change and fighting climate change. And they're resisting and mitigating and adapting, and they're resilient and building resiliency for moving through this climate change world that we live in. And so it's important to highlight, and I think this is something that I try to highlight every time I speak, which is it's really the grassroots organizations that are doing all of this right now, while kind of, we have political bureaucracy preventing us from kind of moving forward, and different, conservative agendas that prevent us from moving forward on a more kind of political and policy level to fight climate change. And so, meanwhile, grassroots movements are mobilizing and already doing this and fighting this every day. So we need to support that. And then we also need to beware of false solutions. The climate crisis has emerged, again, like I mentioned, out of our current economic model of natural resource exploitation and prioritizing profit over people and planet. And many of the proposed solutions continue to privilege just a few at the cost of others' access to natural resources, resulting in a kind of devastating loss of livelihoods and reinforcing these same systems of injustice and inequality that got us to where we are now. So an example of that, I think a lot of people are invested in hydroelectric plants for that type of electricity. And a lot of times what people don't know is that these major hydroelectric facilities displace entire communities and destroy the environment where the communities live. And so, one of the things that so that's something that people don't talk about that often or know about necessarily. And so while hydroelectric power might be kind of posed as an alternative to fossil fuel driven electricity and power, it also has these pitfalls that are impacting communities that we don't really know about. And so an alternative, for example, that some of the communities that we're funding are building really localized and smaller hydroelectric plants. And really, they're not even they're facilities. And this really ensures also that the electricity is going to the communities that have built it and that where the facilities are located, because that's also a pitfall of these large hydroelectric facilities, is that the power often doesn't go to the communities where it is. So that's just one example. And, I think I can go into the types of funding for funders out there. We provide flexible funding. This is what grassroots groups need: long-term support, respecting the autonomy and decision-making of the organizations, having them develop the agenda for the funding, not us. And moving away from this kind of project focus into a more movement building focus, like I was talking about, that can start to address some of these root causes that will then hopefully trickle down and prevent and mitigate some of the issues that we're seeing on a daily basis. So I want to recommend supporting local women and girls driving environmental agendas, not just to get a seat at the table, but a voice and decision making. A lot of people talk about women and girls having a voice or having a seat at the table. And actually, what I would like to emphasize is decision making and access to that, and the right to decision making leadership. Supporting initiatives that actively center girls and young women and gender justice. So there are many young, feminist climate justice activists out there who no one knows about. They're all over the world trying to get access to the climate justice movement, and they are already part of it, but there's not enough of them. So we want to support them. And we also want to support action based on strengthening women's power within the environmental movements, not just reinforcing the kind of disempowerment and victimization of women as kind of victims of climate change. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ursula. That was a really kind of, yeah, I think like kind of cohesive view of like the funding landscape, and even like the fact such as like that, you know, that women and girls or causes only get like 2%. That's like just insane. And I feel like that's something, it's so shocking that it's like almost unbelievable, and I feel like it's not talked about enough. So I love that you brought that up. And also, yeah, I suppose the kind of the work that you're doing, again, like if you weren't in this sphere, you didn't know, you know, kind of what you do, like I think it's great kind of the amount that you are doing, and the different varieties. And again, I think, yeah, emphasizing the importance of like the fact that you have the kind of the activist grantmaker advisors, and actually it's people who actually can give you advice on like what you should be funding, and then when you do make the decision to fund an organization, that it's them kind of, I suppose, calling the shots in a way, or they're kind of guiding you as to how they, you know, can best use the support. And so I think that's always just like super, super important. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, amazing. And again, it's just like the importance of like, you know, yeah, I really like the really interesting, I suppose, about the not framing girls and women as like just victims, and again, actual like active agents in this. I really like that. And again, just really interesting what you were saying about the kind of, I suppose, the hydroelectric plants that like people might have the best of intentions, or they might say, oh yeah, we're doing this, we're great, and actually it could be the complete opposite of what the people on the ground actually need. So I think, yeah, really, really good point that you brought up. Thank you so much for that. A really kind of good overview of that. So next we will turn to Aqlila, if you are there. And again, if people have any questions kind of throughout, please either use the raise hand function or the Q&A function, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. So yes, Aqlila, if you are there, we would love to hear from you next.
Hi.
Hello, hi. I kind of gave a brief introduction at the beginning, but this is Aqlila from the African-based Rise Up movement. I'm a climate activist. So yeah, we would love to hear, you know, kind of more about you, the work that you're doing, and I suppose your perspectives again on kind of like, you know, climate and gender intersections, particularly from the African perspective.
I work with Rise Up movement, and Rise Up movement is a youth-centered, non-governmental and non-profitable organization, and we are focusing on connecting youth activists, especially from the global south, and to amplify the voices of African activists. And our aim is to live in a world where every voice of a youth activist in Africa, it matters, and their potentials are fully unleashed and recognized in the fight to achieve sustainable and just future for all. Our mission is to amplify, to voice the experiences of youth activists in Africa, so as to have equitable representation in the climate conversation sphere globally. And we know that climate change is affecting a lot on our planet, including gender equality. Though climate change and gender equality may seem unrelated, they are closely connected. And there are a number of things that are holding women back around the world. Limited education, violence, and poverty are some of the things that are holding women back in our world. And with climate change in the picture, these effects have doubled and are killing. Climate change is also killing a lot of women more than men, especially in underdeveloped countries where women are dependent on natural resources for domestic labor. And when some of these effects of climate change, especially the main hazards here are droughts and floods, but mainly droughts. And when these disasters occur, getting these resources for women is a bit hard, and they have to go longer distances in search of these resources, which one or the other affects them. And girls are the ones who are expected, young girls are expected to be a part of this, to be a part of helping in domestic labor at home. And when they're expected to go longer distances, this as one way or the other affects their education. They have no time to focus on their education because they tend to get exhausted from these distances. And society is so fixed on what women should and shouldn't do and gender stereotypes, sexism, and lack of female leaders and mentors in society's expectations regarding gender roles continue to negatively inordinate women here. We can't say we're going to deal with climate change without dealing with gender equality. There is no balance. It just won't work. We need educating and empowering and allowing women to voice their opinions and them being a part of decision making can make a huge difference in our journey towards a green and just world. Not only will we be able to learn, but they'll also be able to share the knowledge about the environment and conservation, which will allow their communities and countries to learn, adapt, and lead more sustainable lifestyle. We have a lot of young activists, and the youth is leading in the fight for climate action, and we are more concerned than the older generation. We are doing all we can. We're volunteering, donating, and addressing this issue to help build a green world. We're scared. We aren't living how we should be living because of the fear of not knowing who will be next or what will happen next. Even though we're all different ages, we come from different backgrounds, speak different languages, but we all have the same goal. We get to live on a planet that's not dead and on a just world. We young people aren't just victims, but valuable contributors to climate action. So when they set and develop policies that are on national and global level, we should be present and involved in the process. We all are different. Our way of thinking might not be the same. How they view climate change and how I view and how we view it might be different too. So our ideas of dealing with this issue could be different and effective. So our involvement, we the youth, means new fresh ideas. We need new fresh ideas to deal with this issue. Effective action must be inclusive of everyone. It doesn't matter the gender or where you come from, because when we work on this together, it's easier for us to reach a certain mini goal if we work together. There's no way we can achieve something if we keep on inordinating a certain age group or a certain gender because of society and what society thinks. And Africa is also known as the most vulnerable continent when it comes to climate change, and we're already feeling the impacts of climate change. Our continent is warming faster than the rest of the world, despite contributing to less than 4% of the global emissions. As I've said before, the main hazards being droughts and floods. We're experiencing food insecurity, population displacement, and water scarcity. Since most countries here flow from agriculture and many are small-scale farmers, it's very hard for the continent to move. A lot of things become hard, and since our continent is affected mainly by drought, it means no rainfall. No rainfall means no agricultural production, which means no job opportunities. So here it isn't just a disaster, but a catastrophe. The continent is moving slower and slower. It's very hard for lives to go on. It's way bigger than just the weather. It's changing lives every day here. While the rest of the world is focused on lowering their emissions, we are focusing on finding ways to cope with this increasing threat of climate change and ways to make lives a bit easier for us here. Africa is rarely a part of the conversation, despite being the most affected continent. Our activists' voices aren't amplified. Our knowledge and the knowledge of the indigenous communities here is ignored. We aren't always part of the conversation, and that should change. More climate summits and conferences should be done here so that people here get to understand and know about what's happening in our world and how they can play a part in the transition towards a better world. Not in Africa, climate change, I'd say, is a topic that isn't talked about much. It's a topic that's not normalized. When I approach someone and tell them about climate change, they look at me like I'm speaking certain language they've never understood or they've never heard of, because it's not something that's normalized here. So I feel like if more summits and conferences are done in Africa and the climate talks are normalized here, people will get to understand about climate change and they'll get to learn and they'll get to learn about climate change and how they can play a role in towards change, and how them learning can also lead to them understanding how to cope with this issue and how they can lead more sustainable lifestyles to understand and change their attitude towards this disaster. Apart from working with Rise Up movement, I'm also working with Blue Earth organization, focusing on restoring wetlands at the coast of Mombasa and educating communities about climate change, ocean pollution, and the importance of mangrove plantings, as mangroves are basically lifelines for the coastal areas, and they absorb up to 4 times more carbon than forests and protect us from storms and rising sea levels. And with the issue of droughts and less rainfall here and pollution, the Blue Earth organization is working with communities and fishermen to plant more mangroves, and they've educated them about how it's going to help them lead and cope with this disaster, because they've been complaining about the issue of not getting fish in the ocean, because the fish have gone to where there's more water, since the areas near the shore have dried. So that's what I'm working with. And apart from working with the Blue Earth organization, I'm personally working on educating young girls, especially high school girls, about plastic pollution and climate change, especially the coastal of Kenya, where I come from, and let them understand about climate change and how they can play a role in creating a better communities for themselves. Because I was there for a while earlier in 2021. I was there and I got to meet a few girls, and surprisingly, none of them knew about this issue, and none of them knew about pollution and plastic pollution. And when I was organizing a beach cleanup, most of the girls and most of the people that I approached there told me it's not their job, because apparently it's the job of the government to clean that. So they have no knowledge about this. And we had some people also tell us to maybe just remove the seaweeds and leave the plastic there because they don't decompose. So they don't know about this. So my goal is to currently educate them and let them understand these things, and let them know how they can also be a part of the movement and how they can help better their communities and for themselves and for their future, because not everyone understands this. And so my goal, especially there, not everyone considers this normal, because I had people looking at us weird when we were doing the beach cleanup. They told us we were doing zero work because they're still going to pollute it, and then they'll just wait for other people to clean it. So we took it upon ourselves and spoke to some few high school girls, and I went to the high school that I studied in, and I spoke to some of the girls there. And I got around 15 girls who are interested, and that they are currently trying to learn more about these issues and how they can cope with it. Because some of them actually told me this isn't something that's normalized here. This isn't something that they do. They expect people from other places to come and do it because it's not considered normal to them. Talking about these issues isn't considered normal to them. So one of my goals is to try and remove that mentality that the environment and cleaning the environment isn't their job. I'm trying to remove that mentality. I'm trying to let them understand that it's not just a specific group of organization that's meant to do it, but it's all our job. We're all meant to do this. It's our job. This is our home, and we're the ones who are going to fix it. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And again, just like a great, just kind of like overview of, I suppose, yeah, what is happening in kind of the youth side of the climate movement, and I suppose again the intersection between gender and climate. And again, I think that this whole point about like so many countries that are contributing the least to, I suppose, carbon emissions, et cetera, are actually suffering the worst. I think it's always really good to kind of bring up that point, and just have people know that that's, I suppose, what's happening. I love the point you made at the beginning about how sexism is involved, and kind of stereotypes, and gendered roles, I suppose, in terms of, we expect maybe girls to do more of the domestic chores and get the water, and then that has an impact because that makes them have to walk longer, and again, it has this knock-on effect because there then affects their education, which obviously then affects their employment and livelihood. So I think that's a really just interesting again point to make about again, like just the kind of, I suppose, the links between the two that people don't often think about, and I suppose again the kind of the links on when like a drought happens, and then like what that can lead to, and again it's all this kind of knock-on effects on communities, and it's just horrendous. So thank you so much for giving that kind of overview. We really appreciate it, and again brilliant for, I suppose, people to be educated, youth to know that this is all of our jobs, and not just the select few that we think are in charge. So all of us have a role to play. So thank you so much for kind of drawing attention to all of that. Next up, we will go to Pascaline. So again, please, we're so excited to hear from you. Maybe just give a brief introduction of, I suppose, of what you do, who you are, and and I suppose kind of what the work you're doing with the Girl Scouts and Girl Guides, and just so excited to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you everyone that spoke before me, Ursula and Aqlila. Good morning and good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here and attend this amazing exchange about climate. I'm Pascaline Umulisa. I'm based in Rwanda, and I'm the Global Program Manager for Girl-led Action on Climate Change within World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. Here I will be referring to my association as WAGS. It's the abbreviation of World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. So I would like to first explain who we are. WAGS is the largest global voluntary movement dedicated to girls and young women, and represent currently nearly 10 million of girls in 152 countries. So we provide resources and training to our local partners, and we call these our member organizations around the world, who deliver non-formal education programs which empower girls through girl guiding and Girl Scout groups to tackle the issues that matter to them. So speaking of issues that affect girls, climate change and the need for the environmental sustainability are one of our key concerns as well. And we've actually been supported by other people's evidence, but in 2020, we conducted youth consultation in more than 100 countries, and our girls between 13 and 17 said that climate change is one of their key concerns. So what they told us is critical to understand the experiences on climate change and realize the potential are drivers of change. So here you can read a quote that I picked from the consultation findings. This girl is based in Benin. She said that her parents are farmers, and climate change has had a very bad impact on her. Our crops yield are declining, and it's hurting our family livelihoods. I want to go to university, but my family cannot afford it. Because of the impact on farmers' livelihoods, girls are not going to school, or they are leaving school earlier, and it's the girls who are meant to leave school first. I'm dreaming of one day playing a key role in the climate policies of my country and raising my voice for change. This one speaks volume, and actually it portrays the reality of many of the girls that we see either in Africa or across the globe. Again, in 2022, in January, February of this year, WAGS and the UNICEF launched a EU report poll, and we consulted more than 30,000 girls and young women from 90 countries on climate change and gender equality. When we asked them how much they participate in decision-making about climate change in their own country, they said it was too heavy for them. For example, a girl from India, she's age 23, she said, where I live, we can't even decide how to cut our own hair. This is too big for us to do. And actually, this is the reality of most of the girls that have responded to these consultations. And this calls for action. So what do we do about it in WAGS? Generally, when you are a girl guide, by the law, there is a law that says that a girl guide loves and respects nature. This is instilled in our members as they embark on their personal journey in our movement. But at the institutional level, in WAGs, we have introduced various climate change programs to support this mission. And actually, this one responds to some of the previous speakers' concerns, Ursula and Aqlila, where many girls and women are viewed as victims. Yes, it's the reality, but we wanted to change this and turn them as agents of positive change. So I will cite a few examples of what we have been doing. Since 1986, we have introduced a seminar that calls Helen Storo Seminar. It has brought together groups of young women across the globe in the Swiss Alps to develop their leadership skills, have adventures, and create an environmentally sustainable project to impact their local community. We have got some amazing experiences from these participants, and actually most of them are running our initiatives to date. Moreover, the Plastic Tide Turners Challenge, which is a United Nations Environment Program, has been introduced in our member organizations so that it can educate young people around the world about plastic pollution, giving them the tools to change their personal behavior, inspire their communities, and create a better future for people and the planet. This year, we have created an activity pack named Our Eco Future, which can be accessed from our website. And we are now halfway through our 3-year journey for Girl Guides and Girl Scouts to become environmentally conscious leaders. This pack introduced the issues of climate change and how you can actually take action within your community. But today I'll focus on the newest program that I manage, which is Girl-Led Action on Climate Change. It started in 2020 and will end in 2023 under the financial support of Aqlila Foundation and the Swedish Postcode Foundation. GLAC, which is Girl-Led Action on Climate Change, aims to respond to an urgent need to educate and engage thousands of girls and young women in climate change action. We work with 12 national guiding associations in Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean. And generally, we aim to support 57,000 girls to develop leadership skills in the context of climate change through a very amazing climate change curriculum. And this curriculum was co-created with these girls. It took us a whole year so that we can have a very effective content, which is tailored to the local context. So at the end of the curriculum, girls are awarded a badge to acknowledge the increased knowledge and successful participation in the curriculum. This can also be downloaded from our website, and it's easily adapted to the African regional context. We are yet to develop another one for other regions. And based on experience from previous programs, we know that for every girl actively engaged in a guiding, who we support to develop knowledge and skills, 2 community members will benefit through shared information and skills. And this means that we will have an additional of 114,000 additional community members who will benefit from this action. We also aim to provide micro grants to 180 guiding groups to implement the community action plans, such as those that Aqlila just mentioned, like collecting plastic bottles, introducing solar cookers instead of firewood and charcoals, or combat deforestation by planting trees, removal of invasive grasses, and so on and so forth. We have amazing ideas from our groups, and they are actively engaged in the community to change what we have seen and heard. Lastly, we are also supporting girls to raise their voices in key national and international policy settings. We have heard that we are victims, but we are actually also actors of change. So therefore, we want to have many girls participate in these conversations so that they can influence key climate change policies. So over the last years, we have trained and supported groups to get involved in national policy events, but we have also had some who have attended the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And we are actually preparing other delegates to attend COP this year in Egypt. So as I mentioned, this program is ending in 2023, but we aim to grow and develop this work, but this requires the right level of investment with partners that are committed and passionate about girls and young women taking the lead on climate change. So if we are lucky to get another funding, we would like to expand our work and develop our first global research program on climate change led by young women. So by doing this, we will acquire qualitative and quantitative sex disaggregated climate change data through global girl-led research. We know that data are still a challenge to influence policies. So actually this is going to be one of the responses to our advocacy work. Second, we would like to scale up our unique climate change education and climate-led action program in countries where climate change presents real risks. As I mentioned, we have conducted some consultations and we have seen some communities that are more affected, including Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean. And we would like to make them participate in these courses around climate change adaptation and mitigation. So I guess that's what we are aiming to do. And I look forward to discussing further maybe later. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Pascaline. And again, brilliant even for someone like me who I was never really kind of around the kind of the Girl Guides, Girl Scouts kind of sphere growing up or anything. So it's something I know very little about. So I'm sure maybe there are other people who maybe feel the same, or maybe it's just me who's ignorant. But thank you so much for giving us kind of a great, again, overview of what you do globally. It's so big and it's so amazing. And I love the fact that it's very local focused, local context, and that it's educating young girls and having them actually kind of like be the change makers and actors in their communities. Again, obviously we would all love more kind of, I suppose, decision making, roles and all that, but it's great to kind of even just see what's happening right now. And yeah, I love that. And yeah, again, like brilliant, just kind of doing the micro grants, and again, having kind of girls represent WIDs kind of on the global stage and kind of bringing that, I suppose, the local context and local knowledge to those, kind of global stages, and hopefully kind of bringing that change about. So that is brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Sweet, and thank you all to three of our speakers for again it's even great to see kind of like the kind of overlaps between kind of the work that you're doing, even though you're kind of in different sectors, but it's great, just again, more intersections, more kind of commonalities, and hopefully that will lead to actually affecting lots of real change, as it already is. So thank you all so much. So this, if anyone from the audience has any questions they would like to ask, now is your chance. Again, either use the raise hand function or do ask a question through the Q&A. Otherwise, I can maybe just kind of ask our speakers, I guess, supposed to give kind of, a 1 minute wrap up or on your thoughts, on your hopes for the future, anything that you might want to say. So yeah, if no one has any questions, we can even get started, and then if a question comes in, I can maybe ask that. So I suppose we'll go in the same order again. So Ursula, if you want to maybe give kind of just a few thoughts just to kind of wrap up.
Well, there are many things that I want to say, but just in light of what I've heard with the speakers who spoke after me, I want to emphasize the importance of the activism led by young women. I think that, again, not only are women under-resourced in their environmental activism, but also even more so young women. And that is something that Global Greengrants Fund is working to kind of address with a partner in the International Network of Women's Funds, FRIDA, the Young Feminist Fund, and they provide small grants for young feminists all over the world. And what we would like to do is partner with them on getting more resourcing out there to young feminist climate activists. And so just to say that it's a really important point that everybody has made, and it's exciting to see and hear about so much action happening by young feminist climate activists and young women. And so please keep up the good work, and hopefully you will find resourcing and be supported in that work. So we're all in solidarity behind you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. Yeah, Aqlila, if you want to give maybe kind of, again, similar thing, just your final wrap up thoughts, hopes for the future, anything like that.
My hopes for the future is to see equal representation of women when it comes to decision making, and because there's no way we could achieve climate action without including women. We need balance for women to be on the table, is because women are more they have knowledge about environment and conservation, but they don't have access to these tables. They don't have access to higher places where they can share their knowledge and how they can help in creating climate awareness and climate action. So I'd like to see more women and young girls being supported and empowered and being empowered and supported into doing and into being able to share their ideas and thoughts, because together when we share our ideas and thoughts, it's easier for us to come up with an effective way of dealing with this issue when we're all involved. It doesn't matter the age or gender. So I feel like I'd love to see more women and young girls equally represented, and seeing them on that table and being part of the decision is what I want to see a lot of girls and women being part of.
Amazing, absolutely. Again, just really, really lovely. And I think again, all the work that you're doing is contributing to that becoming a reality. So it's just really, really nice to see. And Pascaline.
Thank you so much. So in WAGS, we would really like to see more girls participating in the discourse of climate change, because as Aqlila said, we are very underrepresented there, and nobody knows our personal experiences more than we do. So it's very important that girls raise their voices there, and these policies need to take into account what girls are there to say. So I mentioned that we have the curriculum, which can be adapted and delivered. Would like to see more girls participate and increase their understanding, their skills on climate change, because we want to take take part in the solution, starting from their homes and then the communities and then at the global level. As I mentioned, many NGOs that do this type of work, they have low funding opportunities. So this is also leads me to call for action so that donors could invest in education. I think Ursula said that most of these investors are very interested into infrastructure, which is the reality that we are currently facing. And actually education is one of the key components of tackling climate issues. So funding is also another issue. So I would like to call all the donors and investors to take into account in education, because most of them are based at the grassroots level, and they know better what their priorities are. So lastly, I know that from experience, many donors have very high requirements, and these NGOs that are based at the grassroots level don't have the capacity or the opportunity to get grants. So if they could also ease the heaviness of the requirements so that these women's rights organizations can have access to funding and implement their projects, I think that would bring amazing impact to the local communities and then at the global level. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I really like that kind of call to action at the end. And again, I think a lot of funders, like Ursula was saying, are kind of moving that way, but there is still a lot of work to be done for sure. So yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. So as we come to a close, as everyone hopefully will have seen, Devin in our corner here for the last hour, drawing away. And if you can, make sure that you have your view on gallery. So Devin, basically, and anyone who may have come in a bit late, Devin has been drawing a tapestry for us throughout this event. basically based on what all the speakers have been saying and speaking about. So Devin will give us kind of a brief to show where it's at right now, and we'll obviously share it on our social media afterwards.
Thank you. Let me just change my camera over. I'd be happy to show you where the drawing is at right now. So here, this is where we came in over here, talking about you know, the importance of funding and support, grassroots movements, really addressing system change and acknowledging, as Ursula so eloquently said, about you know, needing to really support a radical shift in all of these systems of oppression and the resource extraction that and the exploitation that our current system is really dependent on, and really needing to address that as you know, together and putting voices together. And then we came over here and we learned about how vulnerable Africa is as a continent, even despite having such low emissions, being so vulnerable to drought and the effects of climate change, and how it really disproportionately does affect women and girls, and how culturally sexism really plays a role in oppressing women. But that voices matter, and we need to really honor those activists and include them in the actual conversation. And then lastly, I was just still drawing some of our girl guides here. So I'm still working on that illustration, but talking about educating young girls, working locally, helping girls understand that they have the power to really create positive change in their communities. Yeah, and then I just was sort of circling back on the idea of activism and adding it back over here to the conversation about, you know, just that conversation that was revolving around supporting activism, supporting those grassroots movements that they have the momentum, they are doing the important work, and really allocating funds that way and making sure that microgrants and other supports get to the folks that are doing the work. So that's kind of where the drawing's at right now. I'll keep illustrating and adding some more color and connections, and the next time you see it, it will be a beautifully colored tapestry of the conversation. Thanks so much for having me today. It was wonderful to listen to you all.
Yes, amazing. Thank you so much. It's such a nice, I think, just kind of feature to have at the end of a conversation, to kind of see it all visually represented. So thank you so much. So yeah, again, like, you'll kind of continue working away, and it'll be much more colorful the next time we show it. So again, just some last points. Please do follow, I suppose, WID on our social medias, and we have a YouTube channel where we'll be recording this event if you want to share with any of your friends or colleagues, people in your network. We also have a monthly newsletter if you want to also subscribe to that through our website, and we'll have a second season of a podcast coming up in the next few weeks as well. The speakers, if you want to put like your socials or anything into the chat so people can follow you, please feel free to do that, or people can, I suppose, just look you up and kind of engage with you online. We also have a feedback form that one of my colleagues might put into the chat now. Otherwise, we'll also put it in kind of a thank you email afterwards, so just to get your thoughts and feedback on the event itself. So thank you all so much for joining. Really appreciate you giving us your time, and hopefully I know I learned a lot, so hopefully you were the same. And again, thank you to our speakers for giving your time, and Devin as well. So bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.